Hey, and welcome back to the Growing Pains podcast. I'm your host, Alyson Caffrey. And today I am sitting down with Meredith McCarty. Meredith and I connected on Instagram when I was like, this gal is cut from my very same cloth. She is a time freedom coach. It is super duper fun to see her work and to have chatted with her on the show about some of the ways that she positions time freedom. She's also on the heels of her third baby. So yes, she just had her third little one, 5 months old at this point. And we had a really cool conversation about being able to actually juggle all the things. So being a business owner and a mom and be in a position to really pursue time freedom. And I really did ask that big question, what is time freedom for a mom who works for herself? So Meredith is a mom on a mission to help solopreneur moms ditch the hustle and build businesses that work for them and not the other way around. She talks quite a bit in the episode about structuring your business around your life and not the other way around, something that I very truly believe in. She's been there. So early on when she started her business in 2018, she juggled a million tasks fueled by willpower and late nights, and it just wasn't the freedom that she was looking for. She tells a lot about that story inside of our episode, but she actually learned the powerful time management and systems to escape the overwhelm. And it wasn't just personal. She basically built the foundation for building a successful agency and managing operations for 6 and 7-figure businesses. So she does a lot of the same things. And we talked so much about operations and their importance, and being able to run a really successful company. So I loved this conversation with Meredith, and I think you guys will too. I'll see you inside. Meredith, welcome to Growing Pains. I am so excited to have you here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I can't wait to dive into all the good stuff.
Me too. Well, we were hatching evil schemes before we pressed record, so we've got a really fun and exciting episode prepared. But let me know really quick first, so we can level the playing field. Can you tell me a little bit about the business you run and a little bit about the family that you have at home?
Yes. So I run at work Time Freedom Co., which is all about helping service-based businesses scale. So using time management techniques, systems, smart systems, automation, all that good stuff. So I'm all about simplifying, streamlining, being super productive with the time that you have. And then at home, I manage a husband, of course, but also 3 little toddlers, basically. Well, they are toddlers. 2 of them are, and then a little baby. So I have 3 under 5, which is crazy to say out loud. And it's also crazy at home. So I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 5-month-old at this time of recording. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you kept blazing on the trail because I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and then y'all just kept going, and we were gotta come up for air.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it's like.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I admire you. And we keep going back and forth. We're like, oh, should we do it? We got to make sure that the kids aren't too old. That conversation is very much happening in our house right now. So seeing moms doing it and going for it is honestly very inspiring to me. So thank you for bringing that into my schedule today.
You get to the point where you're like, there's still, my 2-year-old's still in diapers. Do we do it now? It's yeah. If we waited, we wouldn't have probably had a third, because it was once you get a taste of that good life of that other side, then you're like, oh, do I want to do it again? I don't know. It just brings up all different things.
Yeah, Jack's on the precipice of being potty trained. We're about to do it. And we did it the hard and fast way. What is that book that everybody reads?
We did it too.
You just let them go pants off for a couple of
3 days or whatever.
All of a sudden it just works. Yeah, it was awesome. And also terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, they drink every drink that you can get them. You just keep giving them stuff to drink. Yeah, we did that.
And it's so crazy. But I was oh yeah, this actually works. So until you're on the other side, you're oh, it's just 3 days. So I just have to block out my schedule and I'll be good to go. So we're on the precipice of doing that with Jack. And I'll admit that getting over that threshold of not having to buy any diapers anymore, it definitely is a moment where you're ooh, maybe I don't want to do this again. Or maybe I do. So we're in the thick of that conversation for sure.
Yeah, I get that. Yep, I get it.
All right. Well, let's do this. When did you start your business in the scheme of having your family and the timeline there?
Yeah. So I started my business in 2018. So I actually had my business 2 years prior to becoming a mom. I had my first baby in the peak of COVID in May 2020. And so I started it was actually a virtual assistant business is how I got into the online space, because my husband's job had us moving all over the country every year and a half. And so I would have to be losing or leaving jobs. So I felt like it was stunting me in my career. So I thought, I'm just going to start something that's location independent. And I wanted to be able to have the ability while we were moving around to go home back to Iowa to visit family. So I was like, I could be a virtual assistant. It kept like popping up. And then that turned out to be massively successful. I didn't realize how many people use virtual assistants. So I started in November of 2018. By February 2019, I was completely booked. I needed to hire another virtual assistant onto my team. So from there, it just kind of grew rapidly. We ended up serving 20 plus clients a month. We had 5 team members, and I ran that agency for a couple years. And then I decided that running an agency wasn't for me at that point. Again, I was starting to have babies. I felt like it was very much, I was there day to day, and I was answering to other people when I really wanted the time freedom part of running a business. So then I kind of shifted and pivoted to do more of the consulting work that I do now.
How was your first maternity leave with 20 plus clients, 5 team?
Honestly, it was hilarious. Honestly, looking back, because I would just go shake myself. I remember talking to a client. It was actually a prospective client. I was on a sales call, and she was like, well, aren't you having a baby in a month? And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to take like a week off and it'll be totally fine. I'll be like, I'll be totally fine. I have a team, whatever. And I didn't prepare. I didn't think about it. I was like, yeah, it's no big deal. I'm already home anyway. And the first maternity leave rocked me like nothing else in the entire world. And she was like, you're going to want more time. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I definitely wanted more time. It was, for me, having 3 little ones, going from 0 to 1 was the hardest. Like becoming this new identity of now being a mom, and also your wants and needs change. Going from 0 to 1 was harder than going to 2 to 3. And so the maternity leave wasn't great. I was stretched too thin. I was burnt out. I remember being on sale or like just calls with clients in general, sales calls, any kind of calls. And it would be like I was trying to shush the baby in the background. And it was like literally one day I was like shushing this baby, and I looked at her and I was like, what am I doing? That was kind of like my aha moment of like, she's 6 months old. She doesn't know what this is. And so then that was kind of when it was like, all right, I need to shake some things up here and go a different path.
What was that process like? Because Meredith, I can't imagine what that must have been like to go to a book of business, teammates who were on your side and serving you with those people. What was that like? I mean, you don't have to get into the nitty gritty details, but like, where did you start?
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
So the great thing about becoming a mom is that, so I talk to a lot of women that are like, I'm just not very good with time. And I'm like, moms are the best with time. And we don't give ourselves enough credit, because when I became a mom, the priorities, to me, it was easier with the hours that you had to figure out what actually was going to move the needle forward in your business versus trying to put fluffy stuff that didn't matter. So to me, my priorities were better, and I was able to manage my time better because I started to realize like, this isn't worth a nap time, right? Like if I'm working in a nap, I'm landing a client, right? So like you start to figure that out. But what I did was I just started looking at, first of all, and I was like, we need to slim this down. Is there any clients? So we had so many clients that what I really wanted to do was keep like 4 high level of the clients that we just loved working with and bumping them up. So I started reaching out to every single client that I wanted to move forward with. And I was like, hey, we're introducing these new packages. And so it went from like, $500 a month packages to more like $2,500 a month or $3,500 a month. And then it was like we had less clients bringing in the same amount of revenue. So then it was like, okay, so now we started slimming down our client load for sure. If it didn't make sense, it didn't make sense, and we let them go. I also raised the caliber of the client that I took on, right? So it wasn't like I was accepting any client that came to me. And then we started streamlining the team. And what we did, there was like, for example, we had one client that was working with one specific VA that we had. And I was like, you know what? You guys go work for each other. Like you go work for them
Mhm.
and you don't have to be under me anymore, right? So I just like started simplifying things that was like, okay, I don't need to be managing that person. Looking at time reports, like where are people spending their time? What's actually, again, just moving the needle versus like checking things off. And you would be surprised at like how much information comes up when you actually take like just a little bit of time to start dissecting those little things. So slimming the client load, restructuring the team to make sense, and then offering higher level services for more versus like having those little one-off lower clients.
Mm. I
Mhm.
love this perspective, Meredith, because I had a really similar experience when I became a mom. And I think having a business before becoming a mom and
Mhm.
then having it go through the gauntlet with you, it really does act as a forcing function to be like, okay, what is actually going to move forward in this new identity? I love that you put it as an identity because I do agree that though there are some things that happened before baby or things that I was doing before baby that are still happening, there's a lot of stuff that's either new or a lot of stuff that's just gone, right? You just
Mhm.
kind of take it away. You're like, this isn't working. And the things that you feel like you can start to actually move forward with, it's fewer things, but they get more of you. And I
Yeah.
don't think that that means we have less capacity, right? I actually think it just means we have more capacity for less things. Does that make sense? Like deeper capacity, not wider.
Correct. Yeah. Like that was my goal, is that I didn't want to be just doing 3 tasks for a client. I wanted to be like with the client through everything. Like we were the right hand person to that client. And those clients that stayed with us or moved up with us, they were with us. I mean, I call them the legacy clients because literally they were there for like the entire time we had the agency. So, yeah, I think it was just kind of, it was in a way up leveling the business that came with up leveling how you wanted to actually like live your life is what it
Mm.
happened.
So, what does the business look like now? Are you guys still doing supportive fractional work, or are you guys in a position now where you're advising entirely and consulting entirely?
It's like 80-20. So
Oh, nice.
80% consulting, advising, 20% operations for very specific, like the checklist to work with us operationally month to month is I'm very particular about who I work with. It's typically someone that's referred to me, and it's like somebody that I know that we can help in a very specific way. So it's about 80-20 now.
That's awesome. So, you're on the other side of this massive
Mhm.
transition. How long did that take? Like, I know you were diligent about pruning things back and really specific about what you wanted to keep.
Oh, it took a while. It took probably at least a year because when I started having just more babies, right? It was like it came in phases. So it was like, I had my first baby. I saw that the way that it was running wasn't going to work. So I went down from the agency to slimming down the agency. So that sustained us. I also didn't ever quit. Like I wasn't going to shut down the agency and then not have any revenue, right? So it was like if I lost, it might have been like we're nurturing our current clients over here, which was my team, the day to day. And then I was over here selling, consulting, or, like working in the background. I was
Yeah.
coaches for different people's programs. So it was like I was kind of in like a limbo a little bit of my feet were in both. But then like our last legacy client just left us in June. So, I mean, it's been a process, but it was on purpose because I wanted to do it in a way that was smart and so that we could have everything documented and like that we could do it the right way while having recurring revenue still while we were transitioning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so it took a while.
awesome.
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks who would just be like, burn the boats, like go,
Yeah. Mm-mm.
go,
No.
go for it. So I'm actually really encouraged by this really pragmatic approach because I think a lot of times too, especially as moms, right? Steve, my husband, he always says, he's like, I changed your DNA when we had our first kid. And I'm like, I know. I feel like I accessed this like intuition that didn't exist before. I'm a very pragmatic, a very data driven person. And so I always love to see stuff in black and white before I make a decision. But
Yeah.
sometimes there's just that gut feeling,
A
that one that maybe you
100%.
had when you looked at your daughter, right? And you're like, I
100%.
can't do this anymore. And so,
Yeah.
where did you know? I think for some of my pragmatic folks listening, or maybe even moms who are early in the stage of like developing this like intuitive nature of
Mm,
running their business. Like, when did
mhm.
you know that the heart was louder than the head?
So I think you kind of mentioned it's like a gut feeling, but so I work with a lot of coaches and they talk about like feminine and masculine, right? So like the data is more of the masculine side versus the feminine is more like the flow. And I really have like 3 years ago, Meredith would have like me, I would have been like, that's so woo woo. Like I don't understand like what that is. But I do think there is a piece of having a balance of both, like you said, having information that's black and white, but also having some really tough conversations of like, is this making sense? Something that we do with clients that is so different than other people that do time management stuff is there's so much of that mindset work that comes into it that other people don't really touch. You know, it's like, download this system, use this app, like it'll fix all your problems. But really, until you're like totally right in your mindset, it doesn't change anything. So you have to really think about where you want to be in a year, kind of create a project plan backwards of how to do that. And I also feel like if you're going through something and you're kind of feeling like, oh, this is uncomfortable, I always ask myself the question, like, is it uncomfortable because it's new or is it uncomfortable because it's not aligned? Because those are very two different things. And sometimes it'll be, no, this is new. I just haven't done this before. This is like making me uncomfortable. And another time I'll be like, this is not right. I said yes to this, but I don't want to do this. And I will back out of something if I'm not aligned. I tell my clients all the time, if you open your calendar and see something, like you can cancel it, So I think it's practicing mindset and checking in with yourself constantly instead of getting stuck into a hamster wheel of like, this is how it's always been done.
I wonder if you have an example you can share. I loved the idea about calls. I loved the question is this new or is it not aligned? So is it's just scaring me and this is resistance coming up, like I should move
Hmm.
forward. Do you have any tools, anything that you use, journaling, review processes, any of that sort of thing that you can really start to tether this to a practice?
Yes. What's funny is I don't journal.
No?
And I don't journal. And it's just because I have found that it's a habit that I would like try to get myself into. But it was like the resistance of like, this is not how I like to process things. I like to process things by going in nature. I like to process things by sitting outside and being with my loved ones. Those are like the moments where I'm unplugged that I can, think about things. That's why in the shower, right? We get all our best ideas in the shower. It's because we're not sitting there scrolling. It's because we're actually just talking to ourselves and checking in. So I don't specifically have a practice. I think that it's up to that specific person to say, like, when do I feel most, I keep saying aligned, but when do I feel safe with myself? When do I feel like I am able to have conversations? When do I feel like I'm happiest? And then maybe check in and see how to start implementing that more.
Mm, I love that. I
Mhm.
think every mom listening to this probably needs to hear exactly what you just said, because I think a lot of us feel like we should
Yeah.
all over ourselves all day
Yep.
long, right?
Mhm.
Whether we should be on this platform for marketing or we should be making this margin or this amount of revenue or hiring this team or whatever it looks like for us. Even the shoulds around being a mom are really, really challenging. So I
Mhm.
think I really want to open up this question for you, Meredith, because time freedom is something I think that is the ultimate goal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
time is by far the most expensive commodity that there is in
Yeah.
existence.
Mhm.
And what does it really mean to be time free as a mom who runs a company? Because I think a lot of what is discussed around time freedom, and you and I are really familiar with this conversation, is around systems and leverage and being in a position to be able to manage your time really well and actually get a lot of momentum with the hours that you are spending. But then you can have that whole thing designed to a T and walk downstairs and there's milk spilled all over the floor, right? And we have
Yeah.
to just triage that moment. So, where do we find that give and take being a business owner and a mom around really being the owner over our time?
Yeah. So to me, time freedom means that I get to pick when I work. Let's reverse that. I get to decide where I am, whenever I want to be, with whoever I want to be. So that is whether it's at work or at home. And so to me, it's the opportunity to choose. So that doesn't mean that choosing one or the other is right. So one day you wake up and you choose to be a business owner, meaning whatever you're doing at that moment is for your business, or you choose to be in mom mode. It's just a choice. It has no right or wrong to it. And I have gotten much better at not feeling guilty about that. And I think the third is what kind of helped me with that, because I am 100% present wherever I am. And so that's always my goal. And that helps kind of alleviate if you're feeling guilty, right? Because you're 100% with your kids doing the mom thing, or you're 100% in your business owner thing. Because if you try to, if you're feeling guilty, like, oh, I need to be there while you're doing this, then you're half-assing everything, right? So to me, time freedom just in general means I get to choose my schedule. I get to choose where I'm at. The way that I specifically lay out my life, and I have clients, is that we look at our calendars and we put personal life in first. So for the weekly planning that we're doing, you put in all of your personal life first. That way that you're fitting in work around your personal life, not the opposite, which is what happens a lot, right? You get squeezed out in your personal time. So creating that ideal week of where do you want to spend your time? And everybody is going to have a different answer of what that looks like. But I want to be both places because this was my baby before I actually had babies, and I want it to be successful too. So I think it's just choosing how you spend your time, where you are when you're spending it, and with who. That's time freedom to me.
I love how elegant that is. I think being 100% where you are is really, really awesome. And I admittedly struggle with this, as I'm sure lots of moms do, and maybe in some times I've challenged you as well, Meredith. I feel like it's hard, especially when you're working from home and you've got like littles screaming downstairs or something's going on.
Yep.
And I find that a transition activity for me is actually super helpful. So like if I'm leaving my office, like when we're all set with this interview, since it's toward the end of my day, what I'll likely do is like go wash my face, change into comfy clothes, like put on my mom clothes. And then that kind of signals to my brain, okay, it's time to stop thinking about all the amazing conversations and all the things, all the open loops, right? Inside of our business, all the things that kind of live rent free in the back of our mind. And then the same thing when I'm coming into my business, typically I'll go for a walk and listen to a podcast, do some journaling or intentioning for the start of my work day.
Yeah.
And then I'll get right into it. So do you have anything like that that's kind of a transition activity? I know you said you don't journal, but I'm wondering too, because for me, it's the boundaries are helpful.
No, truly. What I do after we wrap up, I will plan my tomorrow, right? So I'm not wasting time in the morning when I just got the preschool kids dropped off, and it's like you get into the rat race of life. I've already planned. Again, this is putting my CEO hat on and telling like employee Meredith tomorrow what's important, right? What's the needle moving tasks. So I will plan my day the night before. I do a weekly planning, but then I do the night before. And so that has helped me immensely to know what I'm going to do going into the next day versus waking up already feeling like I've had a rush morning or I'm behind, like letting all that stuff go. And then just going right into work. That's kind of what has helped stabilize me, is doing more planning. And then, of course, we're flexible. We're humans. Like we talked about, somebody's going to get sick, and that's totally fine. But the more structured you can be, at least for me and my clients, is that it allows us to have that flexibility.
Yeah, most definitely. Because I think this is the thing I think about, like operations systems, processes, right? Like having regimens in your business and in your schedule. My experience is that if you have that 80-90% of the time, you're going to be in the top 1%, right? And so those little times where the kids get sick, and if we look at them over the spread of an annual calendar, it's really not that much time lost. But if we're hitting, the other weeks, we'll be totally fine. So I think it'll be, the time will be on our side in that way. I'm curious, Meredith, you mentioned your CEO hat, which I think I talk about this a lot, that, we occupy so many different boxes on our org chart when we're first starting out or when we are managing a small lean team, whether we have aspirations of growth or we don't, right? we need to be able to be nimble with the types of roles that we occupy inside of our business and the ways that we spend our time. So for
Mhm.
example, like planning, vision casting, that sort of thing, right? That's a director, CEO level type of task. When do we know when we need to be doing visionary stuff and when we need to be doing individual contribution? Do you have an opinion on that?
It probably depends on the size of your team. I personally have gotten to a point where it's like 90-10. 90% I'm doing the big picture. I'm fulfilling the consulting work part of it. So, of course, that's going to come in too. But really, I've gotten to a place where personally, I am very much I'm not in the weeds. But that's a practice for sure, right? Like we have to get into the practice of asking for support and having people that will push for your individual contribution. So I think that that's helpful. But for me personally, I've gotten to the point where it's like 90% high level because as the CEO or founder or whatever your title is, if you don't have that, that's when you get stuck in the rat race feeling like you're a hamster on the wheel because you're just doing. And so, yeah, you got to have the practice of getting out of that. But I do like when I talked about putting my CEO hat on is like I say CEO hat, meaning when I'm in my weekly planning, my monthly planning, I'm thinking long-term vision casting, right? So I'm thinking higher level. And then I'm able to do weekly, daily, what goes into getting us there. So in a year, 6 months from now, we actually accomplish those goals versus like pushing it back the next 6 months. So that's kind of where you know, I'll go back and forth. But I do think it's a practice that people have to get used to asking for support, especially when we're women and moms and working on receiving. We're really good at giving, but the receiving sometimes needs work.
Yeah, it's so true. And honestly, I know so many moms who are challenged by that, asking for help. I mean, I was one for sure, still am in a lot of ways. Like there are some things I still definitely have a bit of a vice grip on. And it's so interesting when we're talking about freedom and we're talking about being where we want to be and when we want to be there and with the people we want to be with. It's really hard sometimes, I think, especially when you have that grip around certain things inside of either your business or your personal life to be fully present.
It definitely comes down to, again, going back to the mindset stuff of like a lot of clients that I work with, it's the boundaries, right? Triggers. Maybe they're kind of being martyrs, right? Of like, well, I can do it. So there's so much mindset stuff that comes up that people really don't think about because they're just so focused on the processes and systems, which we love. We're geeks like that. But a lot of it is around mindset stuff of what is coming up. Because again, just to add on to other things is there's nothing like owning a business that will bring out like all the stuff that you've drudged up in life, right? Like it all especially if you're leading a team. I mean, it's like, and then a mom. And so, yeah, it's a lot of mindset work to get there for sure.
Totally. I always joke like being a business owner and a mom is like one of the most crazy roller coasters in self-development like I've ever been on. It's just wild. And it's crazy when things come up too, because I personally feel like there are so many things that I am seeking to build in my business from like, I'm learning patience and like really being in a position also too to like hire and nurture people who know better than me, right? Who understand more than me. And so that was a gap I identified in myself years ago where I was like, I always think I'm the smartest person on the team or I'm the one who knows what to do. And so it's until we like let that go and we're cool with not being the one with all the answers and not being the one who knows where all the stuff is at. It's a really helpful thing. And honestly, I'll never forget the first time that we had run out of paper towels and like the next order was there on our doorstep because our house manager and nanny was supporting us in that way. And I was like, I don't even have to think about the fact that we have now a full, cabinet of paper towels. Like that to me, I almost cried. I was like, you're joking that this is actually happening and that
things.
I know it's so crazy. Is that been your experience, Meredith? So you're on now heels of baby number 3. and you're running your business. And what are you really looking for in terms of support, asking for help? What are the big things that have helped you through this season of, I mean, listen, wonderful snuggles, but also probably chaos?
Yeah, right. So I think with each child, I got better. I was always pretty good at asking for support in business. I was always pretty good about like having my team members handle things. I felt like I was really prepared there, but I was not as good at asking for support in my personal life. It's still like my husband was gone for 15 days for work. So I was single momming it
Oh
for
my
15
goodness.
days, still running the business. And yeah, it's a lot. So I've just gotten better at asking for support. So we have a nanny. My kids go to preschool. We live down the road, family members. I called my mother-in-law and I was like, we call them the elders, the 4 and 2-year-old, which is funny because they're the elders. So we're like, do you want the elders for the weekend? And so like those things are just asking for support. My
Mhm.
husband, my husband is always like, yeah, just ask, just ask. But again, we get into this like, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. And so asking your husband, your spouse, it's amazing of like, they can't read your mind. So just ask, right? Even with like having the baby, my firstborn, I remember I did every night shift. I was breastfeeding. I was up. And it wasn't because he didn't want to be. It was because I just did it, right? And it was the first one. And I just remember rocking and being like, I have to do this. I felt like I was doing it myself. And then I just said, like, can you be with the baby? And he was like, yeah, sure. So it's like, you just get better every single time. And then it was like, when I had my third, I wasn't worried at all because I knew, one, you get more confident in being a mom and having babies, right? You just know kind of what it's like. But also, I had gotten over some of that stuff about asking for support there. So I will hire out anything that I want to, cleaning, nanny, like any of that kind of stuff. I really am not like, oh, I don't want to spend the money for that. I will spend the money for that because it just is, there's no point in suffering along, right? Like
Mhm.
we don't need to suffer. And so I think I got to the point where I just was like, we don't need to suffer. We can support ourselves through this.
Honestly, I love that. I remember having so much guilt and shame when I hired a nanny. So we had a nanny supporting our home. Last year, my husband went back to school. And I remember being like, I can do this. I can do the
Yes.
part-time schedule and I can just work in the evenings or at nap times or whatever.
Yep.
And then after being with the kids, just because you're giving so much of yourself, I was like, what do I have left to scrape together to get on these workshops or these calls or to serve my client? And I was just like, man, I just didn't feel like I was operating from a great place. And so
Yeah.
we hired a nanny. And I remember there was so much guilt and shame around that. And then when they came in and finally it was like, oh my gosh, we have somebody who can hang out with the kids. And it wasn't me or my husband, which was a really cool thing for like our relationship too.
Yeah.
Then we started asking if they could do some house stuff, right? And then
Yes.
that was so confronting because I don't know, there was this like picture in my brain where somebody in my family was going to be like, oh, who do you think you are? Like having a house manager, somebody who does like all of your dry goods shopping and like schedules all your events and all the stuff. And I'm like, but actually, I saved like a lot of time, like thinking about that stuff. And they were like
Mhm.
putting together itineraries for our family trips and being like, here are the most family friendly restaurants. And I was like, I would be doing this
Mhm.
research and like having my face in my phone instead
Yeah.
of like being with my kids. So, did you have any of that? Like, I guess mom guilt technically is what it's like called, right? But it's really judgment. Like, you're like afraid of judgment, or at least I was, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just all the stories, right? The stories of the not enoughness, not a good mom, not Also, I think the story that I had was like, well, if I have help and I'm working, then my business needs to be really successful, right? Like
Mm,
if I'm going to be hiring somebody to come be with the kids so that I can work, well, I need to be making a lot of money. So I'm of course, there's things around there. But then I also like you in the paper towel situation. I came home and the nanny for the very first time had unloaded the dishwasher and I wanted to cry because it's like, it was
Literally.
just that one little thing, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, you don't even know how nice this is to have. So I think it was more of like, okay, now it's more pressure for the business for me because it's like, I need to show up and be creating revenue. Also, for it to make sense, right? To make financial
Totally.
sense. Just getting into that my story stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy. I think it's easy to go there, right? It's easy to be like, well, if I'm paying somebody X dollars an hour and
Yep.
this is, trading my time, it's all of the equations. But I think what it comes down to, too, at least for me, was like how excitedly I greet my family, like
Yes.
after periods of work, because I think
Hmm.
for me specifically, this is one of my creative outlets. It's the way I can critically think and flex some of my skills as a professional and as a human being. And I think
Yeah.
going to them and they're like starved for attention and they don't have anything because I'm either putting them in front of the television or whatever that looks
Yeah.
like versus
Yeah.
having a true excited person coming in, supporting them, supporting me. We just get to be together.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate what you mentioned earlier, 100% present, because I feel like getting your schedule down and doing all those things is important, but getting the right type of support in the right way is
Hmm.
critical to making sure that
Oh,
happens.
yeah. So important. Yeah. I mean, I could go on forever of even like business hires that people hire incorrectly, like the wrong positions. And it's like, but yes, the right people in the right place is for sure helpful.
What's on the horizon for the rest of the year? We're winding down the summer at the time of this recording. And, there's a lot still happening, right? In 2024, we've got the whole Q4 and fall season. What are you excited about?
So we are launching a group program, which is so exciting because I've only ever worked mainly one-on-one or in other people's group programs.
Mm.
But the idea of in 2024 for me has been a focus on community, showing up in my community and giving as much value as possible. I think in 2024, just in general, people are realizing how to lead with value versus like just doing more of the exchange. So I'm really focused on fostering a community of like-minded entrepreneurs that can support each other. And so then on the heels of the group program, probably starting like even at the end of 2024 into 2025 so people can start 2025 off hopefully in a better position with their time and tasks and all that good stuff. But yeah, really focused on community and just building all of those around us up. So,
That's amazing,
yeah.
especially for moms who work for themselves. We were talking
Yeah.
before we pressed record about how important community and having folks around you who have shared values, shared goals,
Yes.
really shared experiences. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast is because I just felt like there was not enough of, at least in my immediate circle, there were not enough business owning moms who could tell me how this was going and tell me that it
Yeah.
was okay and that you could like show up imperfectly and do the thing that you needed to do. And it was just so refreshing once I started having these conversations. And once I
Yeah.
stayed connected with a lot of the moms that we've had on the show to
Yeah.
just hear about more things that are aligning with our stories, our experiences, because man, it's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it's true. I think a lot of times in business and in motherhood, we try to lone wolf it. And there's a reason why they always say it takes a village and how everybody was raised in villages. It's like we have to have community. It's in literal human nature to want to belong. And so it's just an important piece in motherhood and in business that it's got to have it.
Man, I love that so much. Meredith, this was an awesome conversation. So thank you so much for everything you brought to the table and for setting aside an hour to be with me when you have a 5-month old at home. I
Of
know that that's
course. No.
probably a huge challenge, but where can folks who are listening stay in touch with you, learn about your programs, the group program that you're launching in your community?
Yeah, so my website's timefreedomco.com. I'm most active on Instagram, and that's just at Time Freedom Co. I'm really simple. And then that free community, I have a free school community that we do monthly workshops and challenges. And again, just having that community around an accountability for being more productive and managing your time better and all that kind of stuff. So join us over there.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all that stuff is linked in the show notes so that moms can get their hands on it. So do you have any encouraging words or last thoughts for moms listening who are growing a business and in the thick of growing their family at home?
Yeah. I would just say that trust what you're feeling, ask yourself, check in with yourself, and make sure that you are, it's so cheesy because everybody says it, filling your cup, right? Of doing that for yourself. So for me, it was my business. For other people, it's, hanging with friends, or I mean, I do that too. But, like if people have hobbies, right? My hobby was always my business. And this is where I pour time into. So make sure that you are setting aside time in your week to make sure that you are feeling fulfilled. So like we've been talking about, you can show up 100% for your family, and it's totally possible to run a business and be a present mother. I really want to make that clear because sometimes you're so in the thick of it that it's like you feel like you're just drowning, you can't breathe. But it is a possibility, and that there are ways to be able to do that. So
thank you, Meredith. That was super encouraging. I appreciate you.